Hello, everyone. Welcome to World of Tanks. This is Mike Ryan, and I'm here for our usual Friday recording. Um, Today I'm in World of Tanks right now, and we're going to go over some stuff. Maybe have a few games, have some fun. So, as you all probably don't know, you already know. I accomplished something that when I first started the game, I never thought I was ever going to accomplish. When I first started playing this game, I had 15 of my friends join me. 15 about 14 years ago. 15 of my favorite friends joined me, and all of us said that we were going to pick a country and complete the entire country and have fun doing it. Well, for me, it's 15 years later to this day, and all of my friends abandoned the game. I'm here all by myself. They didn't accomplish what they said they were going to do. But I did. They said they were going to complete their countries, and I picked the biggest one in the game, and I completed it. I even went so far as to get every single premium tank imaginable. Not only the premiums here, but the premiums that showed up after the fact. So I have all the premiums I paid for, plus I grinded every single tree tank in the game. And my friends have yet to get past tier 5. And they started the same day I did. Not everyone is as into the game. Not everyone is as into the game as I am, I guess. Well, there's indeed something to be said about this. Of course, these two people on the screen drive me batshit. You go away, you're too big. You will leave you here just because that's funny. So, I had to get rid of her. She's way too big. Sorry, guys. There's also something going on with my camera, and I don't exactly know what it is. But I am going to figure out what the hell is going on. So, okay. Yeah, something's going on with my camera. There you go. My camera, for some reason, wasn't working. I don't know why. Anyway, um, my friends 15 years ago chose Germany, America, and USSR. And I picked USSR, and my other two friends picked Germany and US. There wasn't back then there wasn't a lot of countries to choose from. These three, I think these three were the first three in the game. So naturally, this one has a lot of tanks in it. So does this. And definitely this does. This has a lot because this came after USSR was done. France came after UK. All the rest, they still have yet to have a whole hell of a lot. I mean, China came later on, but early in the game, they introduced a few tanks from China that were premium, namely one in particular called the Type 59. Now, the Type 59 has a long and arduous tale behind it. One that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to even tell it. But why not? You see, back in the day, when they made the premium tanks, they didn't test them fully before releasing them. So they just released them to the public just to get them out there so people would buy them. What they didn't know is that the Type 59, original Type 59 they made, was so broken and so OP that everybody and their mother was buying it just because it was broken. And the game panicked because they didn't know what to do. Because premium tanks was still new back then. They didn't even come out with China. China wasn't even on the game yet. But they were introducing tanks from other countries to get people's mouths wet, to get them used to seeing other countries, to see if they might be interested. What they didn't realize is that the Type 59, the way they made it, was so broken that they banned the tank after 3 weeks. So if you didn't buy the original Type 59, you never got the chance to experience a tank as broken as this one was. Eventually, everybody that played that tank had that tank unless they traded it in, they had an opportunity to trade the tank in. If they took that opportunity, they were given a Type 59 G. G meaning gold. It was a gold-plated Type 59. That Type 59 was exactly the way it should have been. But if you kept the original, you still had to take it away. So, in order to keep the original, you would have had to be missing from the game for almost a year and a half. Because for a year and a half, they kept monitoring each and every game to see if a Type 59 existed in the game. If you drove a Type 59 in the game, then logged off, it would be missing the very next day. Why? Because you didn't take the trade-in deal when they offered it to you. That's why. So what I did was I waited a year and a half, didn't log on to the game for a year and a half, then came back, it was still there. Even though it's still there, I still didn't play it for another 2 years. By then, they remade the Type 59 maybe 4 times. One with a 3D style attached to it on a they had a battle pass that gave you a Type 59 with a 3D attachment. After that Type 59 came out through the battle pass with the 3D style attached to it, I eventually started bringing it out slowly but surely. Not all together, slowly, one game at a time. I purposely played below average on purpose. I purposely didn't use the tank's full speed. I tried to play so with it. so that this way the tank wouldn't get flagged as being the original one. After a time, they completely forgot about it. So, to this day, I still don't play that tank the way it should. I still play it because I don't want them to take it away from me. Have I ever played it to its full extent when it first came out? Hell yes, I did. And I won a lot of games. Was it wrong? No, because they made it like that. So that's fine. I took full advantage of it. What I didn't do is I never, to this day, still haven't used that tank to its full extent yet. Because I'm afraid that they're going to take it away. But by now, they've already remade it 4 or 5 times already, with or without the gold paint. So there's no point of doing so, because I haven't taken advantage of it. So there's no point in taking it away if you're not going to use it to its full extent anyway. So I'm just thankful that I got to keep my original one. Thank you very much, Wargaming. I don't take advantage of anything in this game. I play the game for what it is. I enjoy it because it's the game. And I bought that tank with my own money, and I'm very thankful that it never got taken away from me. So people always go up to me and say, "Oh man, you should actually slaughter people with that tank." And have it taken away from me? I don't think so. I enjoy that tank for what it is and when I bought it. Nothing more, nothing less. Anyway, you're probably wondering what's the main topic of my video today. Today I'm going to review the 2 tier 11 tanks from the USSR tree. The first tier 11 tank from the USSR tree is the Object 432U. It is a tier 11 medium tank that is available on the tree if you follow this path. First, you start out here and you work your way down slowly to the KV1. Then you make a right on the KV1, follow the T50 straight down to the KV3. As soon as you hit the KV3, you're going to make a right. And this will leave you to ST2. But if you want the medium, you have to go to the MS1, BT5, make a right, BT7, go straight down T34, 85, T43, T44. Do not take the T54. Make a left, hit the Object 430, 430U, and the 432U, which is the tier 11. That is going to be your tier 11 right there. So it's USSR tree is a tad bit complicated. Now, in my opinion, there's tanks that the Soviets made that in this game, I don't know about real life, but in the game, they're not that good. For example, the tanks that I don't really like out of the Soviet Union, I'll show you guys the route you have to take to get to those tanks. Start from tier 1, Work your way all the way down to tier 5, KV1. Stay straight. Go straight down. When you hit the IS, make a right. All these tanks right here, 1, 2, 3. Those 3 tanks are impossible to play. Those 3 tanks right there are next to impossible to play. They're impossible to play. And if you hit the front at the right place, you'll die instantly, regardless of how much hit points you have. You will die like that. Why? Because the turret is in the back of the tank. And the turrets are so huge that the ammo storage is in the turret. But here's the kicker. A tank requires fuel, correct? Preferably these tanks have diesel. Now, if you look at the KV1, they have oil tankers on the back. Those are their fuel tanks from the old days. Now, in the new tanks, the fuel storage is more protected than it was back in the old days. But it doesn't mean that it's invulnerable to shots. If you hit the area where the fuel is stored in just the right place, the entire tank explodes and the turret flies right off. You want to know why I don't like rear tank? You don't want to know why I don't like tanks with rear-mounted turrets? I'll show you exactly why. This one has 3D style on it, so I can't really show you guys. If it didn't have the 3D style, it'd be easy, but it does. Now you have to understand, this tank, the crew is all inside this turret right here. The gunner, the loader, the driver, the radio man, and the commander are all in the front. So the crew is right here. The gunnery crew is right here. The engine is right here. And the fuel, want to know where the fuel is? Still in oil drums. Wide out in the open. One shot to that fuel will cook off all the ammunition stored in the turret. Poor engineering on Soviet's part. Engineering that absolutely blows, but think of it. Ammunition cannot be stored inside the tank. Why? It's a rear-mounted turret, which means that the ammunition has to be stored behind the engine. Usually the ammo is stored in a tank, in an old tank like that. The ammunition is usually stored next to the firewall behind the engine or in front of the engine if it's in the rear. So you have inside the tank, you have in the front of a normal tank. Let's say you have a KV1. KV1 has in the front of the tank, they have the driver and the radio man and the commander. Or if the commander is the radio man, they do both. That's fine. Normally you'd have the commander, the radio man, and the driver all in the front. And you'll have the two loaders and the gunner up inside the turret and in the body of the tank. Normally you'll have one loader down here, another loader up here with the gunner. The reason why you have two loaders is because one loader retrieves spare ammunition scattered throughout the tank and delivers it to the second loader. Second loader loads the ammo into the gun, and that's it. That's the reason why you have two loaders, because that particular tank has ammo scattered everywhere. There's not ammo in one place. Here's the part about some of these tanks that I don't understand. Everybody loves autoloaders in this game. Autoloaders are amazing. They just automatically pop shots. But there's an issue with an autoloader. There's a big, huge problem with an autoloader. Now, autoloaders, the new autoloaders have automatic loading systems. Autoloaders from this day and age, let's say the earliest autoloader would have to be, the earliest Soviet autoloader would have to be, I'm trying to remember where it is. I know I have it. The very first, I don't know if it was the very first, but it was one of the earliest autoloaders that Soviets ever had, I think. Hopefully I could find it. Nope, that's not it. Where is it? Oh, yes. Come on, where are you? I know you're here somewhere. Right here. As far as I know, this is the earliest Soviet Union autoloader. This is a KV-1SA. KV-1, it's a KV-1S with an autoloader, which is the reason where the A comes from. A stands for autoloader. So it's a KV-1S with an autoloader. Now, if you'll notice one thing about this KV-1S, it looks exactly like a KV-1, except for one detail, one small detail. The turret. The turret, to me, the turret looks longer than a KV-1S. Why does it look like that? Well, the reason why it looks like this is because the ammo gets stored into the turret. They pull the cartridge out of the gun, open it up, and load the cartridge full of shells. Then clip it into the gun, and the gunner fires the shells from the magazine. That's the way the loaders work in this game. Now, you will see how I'm correct right now, because I'm about to show you guys why I'm right. He's the radio operator. He's the loader. There's only one loader, which means that these shells are only stored when there's only one loader. That means all the shells in the tank are stored in the turret. So the most vulnerable spot in this tank is the turret. You would think it would be the fuel tanks because they're right here. See? if you fire high explosive shell at the fuel tanks, in reality, it would cook the fuel tanks, and it would cook the fuel tank off. It would explode, and it would damage the other fuel. It would damage the fuel tank next to it. That's it. So rather than have that added into the game, they just left the fuel tanks alone and did not make them weak spot. Because if the fuel explodes, it's not gonna penetrate the armor. It's not gonna weaken the armor. All it's going to do is reduce the amount of fuel you have. And the fact of the matter is, in this game, these tanks don't run on fuel. They just exist. So, hitting a fuel tank that explodes and doesn't do damage is not it's not worth putting a hitbox on it. So these tanks are placed in the spot where if they explode, they're not going to do a tremendous amount of damage to the tank. They're not even going to penetrate the tank. In fact, they're blocking a key spot that you can aim for. So the only weak spot, the only real big red flag this tank actually does have is the two armored doors right here. If you aim for right there or right there with the high explosive, you might be able to cook off the ammo and send that turret flying right off. That turret could easily fly off if you are able to cook the ammo off. Remember, you do not want to penetrate that. You just want to heat up the ammunition stored inside the tank. Now, if you happen to know where the ammo is stored in a tank, you're going to want to aim for the ammo first. Aim for the engine or the ammo first. Now, if you're in artillery, your main objective is to aim behind the turret. You're going to try, if you're hitting from an artillery point of view, you're going to see a tank like that from an overhead view. Now, if you're artillery, your objective as artillery is to aim for the weakest spot in the tank. Now, the most heavily armored part of the tank is going to be this. This is the most heavily armored part of any tank in World War II. Right here. The weakest part of the tank is going to be here and here. Medium armor is here, 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 and here. And absolute bottom of the barrel crap armor that sucks for a medium tank would be here. A heavy tank, this would be heavy armor. But if you have a gun that has 122 millimeters or larger, you should have no trouble penetrating the lower glacis. If you have any less than 122 millimeters gun, it's going to be difficult, extremely difficult to penetrate that lower glacis if you're using a regular armor penetrating shell. My suggestion is, if you're aiming for it full on, no angle, weaken the spot with an HE round first. Then fire an AP round right at the target it should go through. Remember, armor is measured by thickness. Okay, guys? If you fire an HE round at a spot, that high explosive shell will explode and that armor will weaken. And when you weaken the armor, it's not going to show you guys it's weakened. It's just going to be weakened automatically. You see, this game, they were pretty smart when they made this game. Because if you fire an HE round at a heavily armored target, let's say you fire 2 HE rounds at an extremely armored target. You do like 15 damage per shot. Same spot. Then you fire a third round at the same spot. It's going to penetrate. Why? Because you weakened that heavy, thick armor. You weakened it enough that that armor penetrating shell is now going to go through. You have to really pay attention to the amount of thickness that's in an armor. How do you do that? That's where World of Tanks 2.0 comes from. Click the service. It's going to have About Vehicle, Repairs, Compare, Research, Armor, Quick Service. Push Armor. Now this is the armor thickness measure. This means there is no armor at all. This means you have... Wait. This means you have low armor. This means red means you have heavy armor. Yellow is mediocre. As I said before, this is normal mediocre armor. The heaviest armor is always going to be the front of the turret. Always. Always the front of the turret. You never aim at a person's turret. Unless the turret is not made right. If this part right here is made of cloth and has no... There are a few turrets out there with tanks that have cloth around the gun to allow the gun to move in different directions. Tanks that have heavily armored cowls like this can only move in the direction that the turret allows them to go. For example, the turret moves up and it moves down. Why? Because it's hinged. There are a few tanks. Tank destroyers, for example. Let's pull a tank destroyer out. I'll show you guys what I mean. A tank destroyer is a different story. Tank destroyers are much, much different. Now, tank destroyers do not have turrets. This one has what's called a mini turret. they built a half-size turret into the front of the tank, so you can move it. It will not move, yet you can fire 180 degrees. And this is a tank destroyer. Pretty handy. A tank destroyer that has a mini turret. So the turret will not go behind you, but you can go 180. A full 45-degree angle on both sides, we should say. It's about 51-degree angle. Now, as far as gun raising and lowering, it can go up at a pretty decent angle. That's not that bad. This is not a bad gun range. That's it. So all in all, this is not a bad gun range. Now, this is thick armor right here. Now, you guys have always seen lower glaciers had weak armor. Now look at this one. This one does not have weak armor. Why does it have the strongest armor in the tank? Why? This is why. See this right there? That and that? Those are tow hook. Those are tow loops. This tank is made to pull other tanks out of a ditch. This is a tank destroyer, yes, but this tank's main job, it's kind of like a tow truck in a way. It pulls other tanks out of ditches in case it gets stuck. That's the reason why they took a KV-4 chassis and turned it into a tank destroyer. Because its main duty was to yank tanks that were stuck and bring them back to base. And just in case they had to see what's in front of them, see that? There's an observation device. So when they're towing, when they're towing somebody back, if the gunner needs to turn and fire, he'll simply turn the gun. He'll simply look out that slot, turn the gun with the gun barrel up, and fire at targets. So that is also another reason why the gun is able to raise so high in this tank. A tank destroyer normally does not have a gun range like this. A tank destroyer, the gun simply wiggles. That's it. It just slightly wiggles. This is much more than a wiggle. By all means, this is not a wiggle. Now, a tank destroyer that has a wiggle, I will show you guys what a tank destroyer that has a wiggle looks like. I don't even think this one has a wiggle, but we can take a look. This one is more like a ball joint. This one has the armored cowl in the front, the spaced armored cowl in the front. Now, it has 120 millimeters of spaced armor, including the 100 millimeters of normal armor in back, which means that the cowl is sitting on 210 millimeters of armor in total around the gun here. Why? Because there's armor behind this right there. Spaced armor sometimes has armor behind it. It's just armor on top of armor. So space armor, you have the gun mantlet, for example, the gun mantlet, which is right there, it's the purple thing right there, is 110 millimeters of space armor. Now, the hull is 90. This is 90 millimeters. So 90 plus 100, 190. So altogether, if you aim one shot at this gun mantlet, you're going to be aiming at 190 millimeters of armor because it's going to go through two. Plus, if you penetrate the mantlet, you still have to penetrate, the shell still has to go through the hull, which is only 90, but that's still armor. So you have to go through two armors to get through the mantlet. So why bother? So what can you aim for in the front of a tank destroyer? You can track it so it can't move at all. All it can do is move the gun. That's it. Or take a simple HE round, aim it right for the observation device. HE rounds will go through observation devices because all that is glass. It will injure the crew members and damage some of the equipment that's behind it. Now, you have to imagine what's behind the observation device. Let's take a look. Now, engine's right here. Fuel's right here. So if you aim for this observation device, you are not going to hit anything involving the power of the tank, because that's right here. Plus, it's not fully connected. It's only halfway connected to the bottom. So it's not going to fully damage any of that behind there. What it will hit, in a tank destroyer, the ammunition is stored on the walls of the tank. Probably ammunition will be stored on the wall right there. And right there. So there might be a chance that if you aim for this, you might be able to hit the ammunition and therefore cook that off. If you cook off the ammunition, that might damage the engine in the process and put that thing out of commission. But again, the only way to hit the fuel is to hit the fuel tanks, but as you can see, the fuel tanks are considered not targets. The fuel tanks are not valid targets. Good thing, because the Soviet Union is the only country that has fuel tanks on the outside of the tank. All the other countries have fuel tanks inside the tank, inside the armor. You're probably thinking, oh, that's not fair. They should put it on the outside. They should make those so you can hit them. Then no one would ever play this game and play these tanks. They had no choice. Fuel tanks are there for show only. So the weak spots in this tank, as I said before, they're on the top, here, and here, and right there, and right there. All the rest is right there. Maybe if you really feel like you're getting desperate, aim for the tracks. At least it won't move. Now, what you could do is if you have a brass set, aim one HE shell right down the barrel of the gun, and that will blow that will damage the gun. If the gun's loaded, then the gun will explode, ammunition will explode, and the tank will explode with it. Because that explosion will cook off all the ammo stored inside the tank, kill all the crew members in the tank, and they'll be dead. And that tank will be toasted. So, in reality, the weakest spot in the tank is always right down the barrel, which nobody ever thinks of. And it's not labeled. In reality, the weakest spot in the tank is always right down the barrel of the gun. That would be an insta-kill. Instantly dead. No matter what tank you have, aiming right down the barrel of the gun is an insta-kill. There's zero armor protecting the tank down the barrel of the gun. Why? All there is a tiny little 2mm enclosure that they close and lock to hold the shell in, and that's it. A tiny 2mm. So there's 2mm of protection protecting the crew from the shell exploding in the tank. 2mm. 2mm is not armor. That's sheet metal. That's it. But it doesn't mention that. In reality, in real life, the weakest part of a tank is always observation devices, only with HE shells, and right down the barrel of the gun with anything. That would be the weakest part of a tank, of this tank in real life. In the game, one HE shell here or here, one HE shell here or here to disable it, AP round here or here, and if you're artillery aims for here and there. That's the weak spots in the tank, in any tank destroyer, no matter what country it is. There's always weak spots. Now, the one thing that people like to do is people like to aim for here. Now, these are good if the tank sinks below the wheels. This tank sits, if the tank sinks below the wheel hub, below the wheel axles, then aim in between the wheels. If the tank does not sink below the wheel axles, then it would go through easier, but it might not do a tremendous amount of damage. Try and find a tank that does do that. I think this one doesn't, but it does have a tremendous, it does sink tremendously. It does sink very low. Let's see what the side armor looks like on this one. Now, orange would be right about there. 200 millimeters of space, 200 millimeters of normal armor. Right behind, right there. Now, the reason why this has such thick armor on the sides is because this is not a tank destroyer. This is a KV-4 heavy tank. KV-4 heavy tanks has thick armor to begin with. So this just solidifies that this is indeed a heavy tank. Now, the reason why there isn't a whole hell of a lot of weak spots in this tank is mainly because they took a KV-4 heavy tank and turned it into a tank destroyer. By doing that, it had a slower speed and was more vulnerable to being seen. So it had to be able to take a tremendous amount of damage before it died. So they had to thicken the armor tremendously. Remember, tank destroyers do not have to move like heavy tanks do. All they have to do is sit there and snipe. That's it. So in reality, this is a better tank destroyer if you want to assault a position. Hence the reason why this is called an assault tank destroyer. This is called an assault tank destroyer because this can move with the heavy tanks, but this is meant to move with the heavy tanks, but it's meant to stay behind at the back of the heavy tanks. It's meant to provide fire support from the rear, but still move with the heavy tanks. But you're supposed to stay behind the heavies and support them from the rear. That's what its main job is. Tank destroyers are mainly support vehicles. That's what the main job is. The main job is not to run. The main job is not to do what light tanks do. They don't do what medium tanks do. They support. They only support, and that's it. Now, let me show you guys something. I'm going to show you guys. Let's see. We want. How about. How about a T-34? This is a perfect example of a real tank. The T-34, back in 1941, that they had a lot of, this is a recreation of that tank. Let's take a look at the armor for this tank. Now, as you can see, armor is pretty solid. The reason why it's so solid is because back in World War II, the T-34s were made in one piece. They didn't do a lot of welding. So what they did was they made the tank in one piece and sent that one piece down the assembly line. Kind of like the M4 Shermans. M4 Shermans were the same exact way. M4 Shermans were made in one piece on an assembly line. Soviets made this on an assembly line in one piece in World War II. The only thing that's different is the observation devices. Observation devices are as follows. 1, 2, 3. That's a periscope, and that's a periscope. These are observation screens. These are periscopes. Now, you can aim for the periscopes. All it's going to do, if you aim for periscopes, it's going to injure the person looking into the periscope. Namely, this is the loader's periscope, and this is the gunner's periscope. If the gunner is looking that way to the periscope, then that's what he's going to look out of. There's also a slot right there they can look out of on the side. But this is not considered, they did not make this a damageable target. This is part of the hull. But in real life, there's slots on the sides where the loader can look out these side slots and see if there's anybody on the sides. See? So the loader has freedom to travel from here to here to here to check on sides of the check on both sides of the tank. So the loader can let the gunner know, hey, we have to turn this. I'm going to turn the turret around. We have somebody to our left. So the loader would turn the turret, and that's it. The loader would simply turn the turret to face the enemy. Gunner would fire. Gunner would have the bullet in there already. Gunner would fire, and they'd kill their target. That's the way these tanks worked in World War II. So a lot of the tanks in the game, they're accurate, but they're not exactly period accurate. This tank, if you complete the entire country, they will give you this tank. This tank is very period accurate. This tank is way too period accurate. There's very little weak spots in this tank. Very little weak spots for a medium. As you can see, armor is the same no matter where you are. The only weak spots are on top of the tank, which is a normality. So, if you're up high, looking down, there's still no weak spots. Still the same. It's all yellow. Now this is 45. This is 40. Why is this 40? Look very carefully. See that? That and that. Flip these latches. This hinge is open to do maintenance on the engine. Okay? The fuel tanks are located through this door. Open this door. From here, hinge falls open. Fill the fuel tank right here. The fuel tank is right next to the engine, behind the armor. That is the way the T-34s were made. They put the fuel tanks behind the armor next to the engine. Eventually, down the road, they started to learn you do not put fuel out in the open. Put it in the tank where it belongs. So, The T-34s were mass produced for one reason, because the tank was one piece. The tank was built, the hull was built with a hole right here where the turret went, and this was wide open. And this was wide open. They put a door. This was a door right here. This was a door right here. This is a door. This is an emergency escape hatch right here. And the main exit hatch is right here. The main exit hatch for the gunnery crew is right there. The main exit hatch for the crew inside the tank is right here. And the main hatch for the front crew members is right here. If you were to aim for those three hatches, because they are not one piece, those three hatches you might be able to squeak ahead past those. If you are a light tank and your gun is extremely small, you might be able to squeak a shot past those doors. For the most part, the T-34 in 1941 was exactly like the M4 Sherman. It came off the assembly line in one piece. The only difference is that they had armored doors here. This was wide open because they had to drop the engine in, and they had to drop everything else in the tank also. And the turret was put on after the fact and installed in. That's the way things worked with Soviet Union. That's the way they built the tanks. Very smart building. Now, if you look at today's tanks, you'll notice from YouTube videos lately that a lot of their turrets are flying off. And I've had one people mention to me in a comment a very long time ago, why does that happen? I don't understand why the turrets keep flying off. Let me explain something to you guys. I'm going to use the T90, the brand new T90 as an example. Okay, guys? We're going to go back. We're going to go back to the heavy tanks. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the heavy tanks, and we're going to go right back to the autoloader. We're going to pretend that this is a T90. Okay, guys? Now, if this was a T90, the one place that Ukraine would be aiming for is where the ammunition is located. Now, ammo storage is always located, always on an autoloader. Ammo storage is always behind the gun, because when the cartridge is empty, the cartridge gets popped out, and the loaders have to load that cartridge full of shells, which means instead of running around inside of the tank looking for shells, they have to be readily available. So the shells have to be stored near the gun, which means that the turret has to be longer and well armored. But how do they get the reloaded shells into the tank. That's how. They have doors. And those doors are not as armored as all the rest. So Ukraine takes full advantage of that. What they also do is Ukraine aims for the turret ring. Right there. And now in real life, the turret ring is probably one of the weakest parts in the tank. Period. And the T90, this turret is flush against the body. The T90 has what's called a turret ring. And that turret ring has literally no armor. It's really easy to damage the inside of the tank with the turret ring. So they're taking kamikaze drones, aiming right for that turret ring. The turret flies off. The explosion from the drone cooks off the ammunition located into the turret, blows the turret straight off the tank, and blows the tank itself up as well. Because the fuel is now stored inside the tank instead of the ammo being stored outside of the tank like it is here. The fuel is now inside of the tank. So if they cooked off this ammo here, this would explode, and this fuel here would heat up, but it would not blow up, which means that the crew below it would take damage, but they wouldn't die. The crews in the T90s had a very low survival rate because the fuel and the ammo cooked off if you hit the turret ring at just the right place. It would completely cook off the armor. It would cook off the ammo, immediately set off the fuel, and the whole tank would explode. That's what I call poor engineering. A tank has to be impervious to shots. The way this tank looks right now, it's doing fairly well. I mean, there's literally no green. This tank, if the T90 was built like this one was, like this one was built, they would have been okay. But unfortunately, they had to have an autoloader. And because they had an autoloader with no arm protection, the tank went poof. Plus, don't forget, Russia as we know it right now does not have any working heavy tanks. Russia only has medium tanks. And maybe they might have a few tank destroyers hanging around, but they're not in usable condition. The only usable tanks that they ever had, Russia, are medium tanks. They abandoned all the heavy tanks and the tank destroyers and the artillery and just went all out and made hundreds and thousands of medium tanks. They wanted speed and power. Having speed and power, something has to go, which means speed. Lack of armor means more speed. So the T90 was wicked fast. and it fired a lot of shots. But in order to not die, you need to be able to pilot that thing like your life depends on it. And unfortunately, they had normal people piloting those things, so they had no idea what the hell they were doing. Didn't have well trained. If they had a well trained person piloting each tank, they wouldn't get blown up half as much as they did. It's all about training, and they didn't have any training, so therefore all the tanks got blown up. Now remember, a tank is only as good as the crew that's in it. If your crew sucks, the tank is gonna suck. And that the same goes with this game. With this game, you could have the best tank in the game, but if your crew sucks, the tank is gonna suck. Your tank is only as good as the crew that's piloting it. For example, you have a tank with really good armor with a crew that's average. I mean, the crew is fully trained and they have a few skills behind their belt, not a lot. This is not a fully trained crew here. So this crew is missing some things. So this is not a fully trained crew. This crew has not seen a lot of battles. I don't take this tank out a lot, as you can see. I am going to show you a very good crew right now. So here's an example of having a good crew. This is a good crew. When you have all their tasks are completely full. My gunner only has one more skill. My driver has all their skills, but I have to decide what skill I want the driver to have. So first off, we have you have to remember when you're adding skills, there are skills that require every crew member to have it learned. Brothers in Arms, every crew member has to have Brothers in Arms in order for that perk to activate. Concealment, every crew member has to have Brothers in Arms learned 100% in order for this to go into effect. Repairs, every crew member has to have repairs in order for that to go into effect. So I think everything else, I don't think we need anything else. So all my other skills all depend on whether I need them or not. Now, these skills in the game are fairly new. And I believe I went over a past video on Crew 2.0. I did a major update video on Crew 2.0. Crew 2.0 described what these skills are all about and what they accomplish and why you would want them on a particular tank. Now for this tank, this is a Type 59 Chinese medium tank. If you know anything about the Type 59, Type 59 is all about put the pedal to the metal, speed as fast as you possibly can. Unfortunately, this tank lost its speed because of a tremendous amount of nerfs. They had nerfed this tank. This tank was way too broken. But there is something you can do. Now you can repair the suspension quicker by activating this. With this, when this is fully trained, when you drive across soft terrain like bushes or sand, that automatically slows you down. When this is learned, you have your full speed when you're driving over that. So this is a good when you're driving. When you want more speed out of your tank, off-road driving is a good skill to have. Without a doubt, is one of the best skills to have. The driver should have that. If you want the tank to be faster, that's a good skill to have. A very good driver skill. Very good driver skill. Now, off-road driving is useless with heavy tanks. It's useless with heavy tanks because heavy tanks are not meant to go fast. Lights and mediums are. They're meant to go fast. Mediums are meant to go faster, not fast. This medium was meant to go really fast, but they nerfed it. So, unfortunately, they nerfed it. But that's okay. Now, last thing I want to go over tonight is I want to go over I had one person drop me a message and had a question. They said I showed this in one of the videos and they were very curious about this tank. Why this says it's an IS-6 and the fact that it's only a tier 8. They asked me, why is IS-6 not on the tech tree? Okay, let's look at the tech tree and look at the IS-7 tech tree and see what it says. Now, IS-7. Now, the tier 8. IS-6 is tier 8. IS-3 is under tier 8. In reality, IS-3 did come after the IS. But IS-6 should have been tier 9. In reality, the IS-6 should have come after the IS-3. The Object 257 took its place. Why, I don't know. Actually, let's read and find out why. Okay, this tank was never I didn't turn it on. All lights are off when I came in the room. You could turn it off because I don't have it on. Anyway, this tank was a failed attempt to create the IS-7. This is the IS-7 that only existed in blueprints. And this was a failed attempt at making the IS-7. So what happened was they went from the IS-3 to the IS. They went from the IS-3 to the IS-6. They went from the IS-3 to this. Object 257 only existed in blueprints. It only existed in blueprints. The IS-6 was made after the IS-3. This was the prerequisite to the IS-7. But the reason why they put the Object 257 in the Tier 9 slot was because Object 257 was made to be the IS-7. So they put it as a Tier 9. In reality, this was supposed to be after the IS-3. It went IS-3, IS-6, IS-7. Object 257 existed only in blueprints. In reality, it was made IS-3, IS-6, IS-7. So this was made after the IS-3. It looks a little bit like the IS-3. It resembles the IS-3, but it's a little different. It's kind of like this tank is a cross between the IS-7 and the IS-3. This has parts of the IS-3 in it, and has parts of the IS-7 in it. This tank is a cross between both tanks. So in reality, IS-6 is kind of like the Tier 9, the true Tier 9. The Object 257 was never made. It only was available in blueprints. That's it. So naturally, the fact it was only available in blueprints, that tank is not going to be perfect. Now this is a premium tank. This is not a tier tank. This tank is 1,000,000 times better than Object 257 Tier 9. And this is a Tier 8. This is a Tier 8 tank that should be a Tier 9. I know. You're probably looking at me and going, that makes no sense. All the equipment is a Tier 8. Not the radio. Now, if all that was Tier 8, why is the radio a Tier 10? Answer me that. Why? Because if this was a tier tank, this would have been the first setup, and then there would have been an upgraded gun. Would have been 2 upgraded guns, a Tier 8, another Tier 8, and a Tier 9. This would have been a Tier 8 turret, and it would have been a Tier 9 turret. Which means the Tier 9 turret would have looked differently than this one. The Tier 9 turret probably looked more like an IS-7. Now this conveniently is a Tier 9 engine. So that's proof positive right there that this is indeed the Tier 9 Soviet Union that actually was made. This is the Tier 9 Soviet Union tank. This is just a Tier 8 equipment on it. There would have been, if this was a tier tank, there would have been upgrades after this. So, in reality, this is just the way it is. They decided to put in a tank that was only made in blueprints and put the actual tank and made it premium only. Hopefully, hoping that someone would figure it out one day. Well, the fact that I own all of them, I was easily able to figure it out. So that's a little something I came up with. Comment down below if I'm wrong for any reason, but personally I think I'm spot on because it all makes sense. I'm going through my head like crazy going, there has to be something. Any Texas object doesn't belong there. So its actual replacement has to be in the game somewhere, and I have to find it. So we know the IS-6 belongs here. We all know that. Okay? So this entire tree is now called in for. The only tank there was the Object 257. IS-6 belongs here. Now, all of these are present accounted for, including this. Now, this I can see made. This one, not so much. Let's find out. Vehicle was developed by the Design Bureau of the Cure plant, existed only in blueprints. Let's try and figure out why this is only in blueprints. Now you have Object 705. This was the last tank with the rear-mounted turret, heavy, that was made. Now, why did they not make another one after that? Let's think about this for a minute. Think real hard. The tank from the front of the tank, right here, the crew here has to eject right here. If the artillery hits this grating right here, it will blow the engine sky high, therefore trapping the crew in the front of the tank, blocking their escape. Because the crew can't escape from a burning tank through this porthole if there's flames all over the place. They won't be able to get out of the tank. The crew has no way to escape the flames. If this engine ever goes up in flames, this crew is trapped in the front of the tank. So having the engine in the front is extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Not to mention the flames will cook off whatever is loaded into this gun and blow this up and cook off everything else behind it. Plus, the fire from the engine will also cook off the ammo storage below. So, having an engine in the front of the tank is extremely dangerous. Hence, the reason why you only see one. They only made one. These existed only in blueprints. Why? Because having an engine in the front is retarded. It's beyond retarded. Now, STI is not something we're familiar with, so let's see if we find out more about this vehicle. Okay, it says the project was developed at a factory number 92 in 1945. Design was featured Object 701. It features the Object 701 IS-4's hull. It features, this has the hull of an IS-4. The suspension and the transmission are completely different. The turret was developed from scratch. It existed only in blueprints. So, in reality, this was supposed to be the IS-4. This was the IS-4's prototype. This was the prototype vehicle for the IS-4. Let's find out why they didn't make this. Armor looks good to me. Other than the top, doesn't look that bad. Now let's look at the IS-4. Let's see why they passed that one by and made the IS-4. Of course, the IS-4 has a bunch of crap on it, but it's okay. We're not looking at that stuff. We're just looking at armor. Now, you're noticing something a little different. Instead of having the turret is completely different. This has a different turret than the ST tank has. This turret is bigger and it has twice the amount of armor. This is heavier armor and thicker armor. This is better armor and that's better armor. The armor on the turret is better on the IS-4 than it is the prototype. That's the reason why the prototype was never considered as an IS-4. Because they were afraid that the armor was too thin. So that does make sense now. Now that we're looking at both tanks, now we finally understand why this was turned down in favor of the IS-4 design. All they did was replace the turret with a more heavily armored turret. That's all they did. STI is the IS-4 with a different turret. Other than that, it has the same exact gun as the IS-4. So in reality, this Tier 9 is the IS-4. The only thing that's different is the turret. That's it. And the fact that it doesn't have a Tier... Actually, I'm not sure if it has a Tier 10 gun. Actually, it does have a Tier 10 gun. It has a Tier 9 gun. It goes from a Tier 8 gun to a Tier 9 gun. Now the IS-7 only has the Tier 10 gun. So the other turret was too small. And it was unable to hold such a heavy gun. See, this is a 130 millimeter gun, which means the barrel has to be longer in order for that bullet to be able to travel at the speed it's supposed to travel at. So the gun is heavier, so it means the turret has to be larger to compensate for the weight, excessive weight pushing on the actual tank, which means the tank has to be bigger and heavier. which means the rear has to be heavier, which means this is a tier 10. It's a bigger, heavier tank. It has to be that. It has to be like that. I mean, if you really think about it, that's just the way it has to go. Now look at the KR1. The bottom chassis. This is not a real tank, by the way. Wargaming designed this. This is tier 11. Gee, that looks awful familiar, don't it? Let's take a look. Nope. It's not that turret. This turret is sloped. The Object 257 turret is sloped. See it? It has like a slope to it. Now let's look at the IS-7. IS-7 turret doesn't quite slope. But it does still slope. See that? It goes down. Now let me show you something. Ready? Watch this. They took a page from reality with the KR1. Do you remember how I was talking about the IS-6? I showed you guys IS-6. Now let me show you something. You guys are gonna laugh your ass off. Ready? Check. Check that out. The KR1 is an IS-6. Watch. Ready? That is a KR1 Tier 11 tank. I present to you IS-6. This is the KR1. See the turret? The turret looks exactly like a KR1. The KR1 turret looks exactly the same. Now, the chassis is going to be exactly like, it's going to have the KV, it's going to have the IS-4 turret, IS-4 chassis with the IS-6 turret, which is what the KR1 has. So in reality, all you have to do is buy the premium IS-6 and you have a tier 11 tank. You technically this is a tier 11 tank. But it's only tier 8 because it has a tier 8 turret. Well, because it has technically a tier 8 turret. It's called tier 8, but let's go back to the KR1. Let's look at the stats for the gun. The gun says 390, 390, 530. Let's go back to the KR1. Let's see if we can try and get a confirmation here. Nope. What they did was they took the KIS-6 body. They took the exact model of the IS-6, switched it around a little bit, made it look different, and then added a beefed up gun and all beefed up stats for this one. So this tank in reality did not exist at all. This was purely for the game only. They got the inspiration for this tank through the IS-6 because the design of the tank is the IS-6. The armor and the weaknesses match up perfectly. Only difference is the IS-6 has stronger armor in Lower Glacius than the KR-1 does. The KR-1 has a weak spot right there. IS-6 does not. Other than that, that's it. That's the only difference between the KR-1 and the IS-6. The IS-6 does not have weak Lower Glacius because the IS-6 was probably made with one piece on an assembly line. This was not. The top half was one piece and the bottom half was another piece. And they're probably welded. This is probably welded on right here. This is probably one big welding seam right here. If you really think about it, it does make sense. It does make sense that they would use the IS-6 to make it. They would use the IS-6 model to make the KR-1. The KR-1 is just simply an IS-6 bigger with better stats. That's all the KR-1 is. The KR-1 is nothing more than an IS Tier 8, Tier 9 IS-6. Tier 9 IS-6. That's it. It's a Tier 9 IS-6 with better stats. That's all the KR-1 is. The KR-1 did not exist in real life. It did not ever exist. It was never meant to exist. The KR-1 is simply part of the game. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's no history involved in the KR-1 because the KR-1 is the IS-6. The tier is the Tier 9 IS-6. The Tier 9 IS-6 that they did not put in this game, that they made a premium tank instead, and they made it Tier 8. The IS-6 belongs in Tier 9. Why? Because IS-6 has an IS-7's hull. Why does a Tier 8 tank have a Tier 10 tank's hull? That makes no sense. Think about it. This has the IS-7's hull. Okay? This also has the IS-7's hull. The only thing that changed with this is that with this model, they changed the look of the front so that you wouldn't put two and two together. This is not the exact look of the IS-6. The IS-6 is supposed to have the exact IS-7's hull underneath it. Everything about the lower hull is exactly the same except for the front. It does not have that point that the IS-7 has. So all they did was they changed the front and called it an IS-6 and sold it as a premium tank. In reality, this is the Tier 9 on the tech tree that belongs on tier 9. This is the tier 9. The object doesn't belong there. That's really what came after the IS-3. It was IS-3, IS-6, then IS-7. So that's all I wanted to go over today. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I hope you guys found this interesting, not informative. I hope you guys found this an interesting perspective on tank placement and where it belongs. Is what I just went over today has nothing to do with the game. I just like going over what could be and what should be. I know this is just a game, and this has nothing to do with the game. I'm just using the game as a perspective because the tanks, I have all of these tanks. I just wanted to show you guys what tanks actually belonged where and why. Okay, guys? So anytime you see a tank that says object, another tank was actually in its place. An object tank was, any tank that says object were not made. They were never created, period. Done. They existed only in blueprints. You need a tank that fits the description, and this one fits the bill perfectly for the tier 9. They changed a couple of things on the overall design and the internals, but pretty much this is the tier 9 IS-6. The game changed it around a little bit to look like an IS-6 tier 8. Because the tier 8 tanks still had that kind of boxy-ish look that this has. The tier 9s were starting to look more sloped, and the heavy tanks were starting to have that high front, high nose. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel. Please hit the notification bell to be notified when videos come out and when I have my live streams on PlayStation Network. Please hit the notification bell for that. Please like, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and give me some positive feedback on what I'm doing right, give some positive feedback on what can be improved or what you would like to see more of on this channel. I really would appreciate that. Thank you very much. See you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. God bless.